This video is brought to you by Gigabyte's Aorus gaming laptops, such as the fantastic Aorus 17G. Throughout the Black Friday period, Gigabyte are offering Australian customers up to $1,000 discounts on new Aorus and Aero models with Nvidia graphics, making them even better buys for gamers and content creators on the go. On top of that, select customers will be eligible for neat bonuses like free SSDs, Netflix gift cards, and even a lucky draw raffle for one of 3 Gigabyte gaming monitors. There's no better time to buy an Aorus 17G or other Gigabyte laptop, so check out the links in the description to learn more. Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed for part 2 of our November Q&A series, the in-person Q&A, which we're very excited about. So yeah, it's been crazy few months, but yeah, it's good to get back and do some questions in person. And we've got more questions from the YouTube community tab to get to right now. So without further ado, let's get to some questions.
I'll go see what Tim has picked out for us.
All right, next question. I think this one was pretty heavily upvoted. Level 1 was talking about how the consoles having AMD chips would make more games be optimized for AMD silicon. But consoles have been AMD the whole time, and yet Nvidia still seems to get all the game studios. Is this due to AMD's drivers and software, or Nvidia offering to work closer with the devs?
Would you like to work closer with us? How do you think here's a large sum of money. Oh, okay, yes, that would be very good. Helpful.
To be fair, they've told us before they don't exchange money, but I'm not sure how accurate
they've actually,
that is.
they've insisted that the money doesn't change hands, but that doesn't necessarily mean what you think it means in the business world, let's say. I don't think anything's been done out of the kindness of their hearts because it is a lot of effort for the devs to implement certain features that Nvidia want implemented, and there's no way they're doing that without some kind of incentive. So I don't believe any of that for a second.
That's not even the question, though.
No. So I guess, first of all, the console link for AMD is very beneficial and it has helped them massively. Except I also see how a lot of people think that it doesn't, because obviously AMD is the dominant force in PC gaming.
You mean Nvidia is the dominant force?
Oh, sorry, Nvidia. Did I say AMD? Nvidia is the dominant force, quite clearly, in PC gaming. So, I guess that's where this gets a little bit confusing. And Nvidia has got a lot of studios on board, and you've seen, the GameWorks program, I suppose. But there are some good examples of where games were developed for PC. So generally, Nvidia's done better when it's been a PC exclusive game. That's sort of Nvidia's territory. Whereas we do have evidence of games either being developed for console or coming over for console that have improved for AMD. So one would be Project Cars. So the original Project Cars game was developed for PC, and the performance on Radeon GPUs, we're going back quite a few generations now, was absolutely atrocious.
That was a particular stink I remember at the time.
It was. I can't remember exact comparisons for you guys, but I did a big article, because this is well before the Hardware Unboxed channel was a thing, but I did an article for TechSpot, and we compared a whole heap of GPUs. So that's still over on TechSpot. If you type in Project Cars TechSpot benchmark, it'll come up straight away in Google. But basically, the Radeon GPUs were terrible, and they never really got better. AMD basically said there's not really much they can do to make it better. So that was a big problem for AMD, and the reason I give that example was because I think it was Project Cars 2, certainly by the time it was Project Cars 3, but I think at some point in time Project Cars 2 went to console, and basically the game was redesigned to work better around AMD's GCN architecture, and that game worked significantly better on Radeon GPUs, and now Project Cars 3 works very well on Radeon GPUs. So one of the most notable changes was the fact that they went from pixel shaders to compute shaders. So GCN, we've talked time and time again about how that was a very compute-heavy architecture, which was both a good and bad thing. It was obviously good because it had the console link, so when games came over, they worked really well. But then if games used pixel shaders, didn't work very well, and we saw that again in the original Project Cars and quite a few other PC-exclusive games. Except because now AMD has, solidified this console link. They've now got, new Zen 2 cores in them.
Yeah, it's a full second gen of consoles.
Yeah. So that's forced Nvidia to react, and that's why we're now seeing Ampere being such a compute-heavy architecture. They've sort of gone the way that GCN went, and that's why they've made those changes.
I've just got one extra point on this as well. I think it's it really helps AMD's driver team out with these sort of launches, because AMD is clearly a much smaller company than Nvidia, so they have far fewer resources to dedicate to driver development. So by having a lot of that work done on the console side helps them to have better day one support for games that are cross-platform like this, so they don't have to do as much work, don't have to get software developers involved as much. So generally speaking, despite Radeon and AMD being a much smaller company than Nvidia, these days a lot of games run pretty well on AMD hardware straight out of the gate, especially the cross-platform games. Whereas it sounds like Nvidia still has to do quite a bit of getting in there, getting stuff done with the driver teams to really get stuff working well. So while that's something that doesn't really play out on the surface for us, it probably saves AMD a bit of money long term by being able to have this wide ecosystem, developers needing to do it for consoles, getting that support from Sony and Microsoft in there as well. It's quite a streamlined process for them. Whereas Nvidia is sort of fighting that battle of, well, we've got the other architecture, so we need to engage more. And I think that's why we see more Nvidia getting involved more and getting involved at a deeper level and that sort of thing to try and optimize their games. Because realistically speaking, like, Nvidia is so much bigger that a lot of the time the games probably should be running quite a bit better on their hardware, considering they've got so many...
Majority market share.
Yeah, majority market share, lots of software developers on board. So while we're not seeing a situation where games are running so much faster than Nvidia on these new GPUs and the GCN architecture and now RDNA, it at least allows AMD to keep up with the pack and deliver good performance. And some games you'll see where it's really well optimized, like an Assassin's Creed game that's just come out. And that's another game that has slowly become more and more optimized for AMD's design.
Very much so, yep.
So something like that, or like a Forza Horizon 4 from a few years ago, you'll see these big gains, but then at least for the general title, they're competitive despite it being a smaller company. So I think, gamers are probably expecting there to be big gains, but I think it's been very beneficial for them overall.
Definitely.
All right, next question. What do you see becoming a standard first? Ray tracing with minimal impact on frame rate, or HDR10? Also, which one do you feel is the best visual upgrade between both, simply judging with your eyes? So I guess HDR10 is already a standard. It's maybe not a standard for monitors, but it kind of already is a thing. Like, it's standardized. So based on that, I guess that's the answer to which is a standard. What is the best visual upgrade for my eyes? I think it's hard to say because it depends on the sort of ray tracing implementation you're talking about. I think HDR is probably a better visual upgrade, just because I guess the contrast and the brightness and sort of the spectacular visuals you can get from HDR feels to me like, having used a few HDR displays and that, feels to me to be a bigger upgrade than ray tracing. I guess it's also the benefit that you can turn HDR on at no performance cost at all, which kind of helps out the situation, even though you're only talking about the sort of visual side of things. Maybe ray tracing in the future, once we get fully ray traced environments, that will become more impactful than HDR. But if you've never used HDR before, it really is a significant upgrade when it's done well. So I'd say that's probably the standard now and the best upgrade.
All right, what are the chances that we will get a true RX 480 successor this generation? So similar price range, but justifiable performance uplift. I would say the chances that that's going to happen are very high. I can't imagine we're still going to be recommending the RX 580 for just over $100 sort of, well, by this time next year. I don't know when, but you would think probably somewhere like 3 months from now.
I was going to say probably mid-2021. Once we start getting to the $200, $150 cards.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Somewhere around there. But yes, I think we will. When, it'll be sometime next year. Sometime between early and mid, I would have thought.
Yeah, we've still got the $400 and $300 cards to go.
Yeah,
so
sure. Yep.
Still a bit of time, but...
Nvidia will get there first. That's for sure.
They kind of neglected that market, so they need to get on it and...
the GeForce 16 series wasn't bad. I mean, as far as the Turing generation goes. Anyway, we'll move on.
Right, next question. In one of the previous Q&As, Tim said that he wanted Radeon to compete at the $600 to $700 price bracket. Did you guys expect a 3090 competitor from AMD this generation?
I had to laugh at that based on what we said earlier. They're competing at the $800 price point, apparently, but anyway.
Yeah. It's interesting. I would say that without having known the performance of the 3090, that I wouldn't have expected them to compete with like a $1,500 GPU. I was expecting more the 3080 type competition. But because the 3090 isn't that much faster in most games than a 3080, it's not that much of a stretch to say, well, I was expecting them to compete with a 3080 type product, so competing with a card that's only slightly faster isn't that much of a stretch. So I guess it's surprising that they can get something. Well, we haven't seen the performance yet, so that's kind of the caveat on this, but I think it's surprising and not surprising based on a number of fronts. But it's good. It's good to see performance in that range.
Yep, we'll see how the 1600 XT performs in like 2 weeks from now, I think.
Yep, hopefully.
Do you think that once 5nm fabrication comes to GPUs, that the cost will come down for the MSRP, or will they continue like smartphones have and keep going up in price? Well, I don't think any of this really hinges on the process, apart from maybe supply, but they're really just charging. The market dictates the price, I suppose, is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I can't see leading edge fabrication getting any cheaper. I can't see a TSMC selling a 5nm wafer for less than a 7nm wafer.
Well, you already know that the fabrication costs through the roof to go.
Yeah, that's right.
For each improvement. So, no, expect 5nm to cost even more.
Yep.
How is it possible that two competing companies launch their products, so AMD and Nvidia, with a similar level of improvement compared to the previous generation? Well, I don't know if it's a similar level of improvement, but I guess your question is, how has AMD all of a sudden become more competitive when Nvidia seemingly took a rather large step with Ampere? And it's just a whole heap of factors coming together. Basically, the maturity, the 7nm process maturing, AMD getting better with their designs, and the whole new RDNA 2 architecture, the second step that they made with the 5700 XT, so improving upon that. So a whole heap of factors came together for AMD, and I guess the reason why Nvidia aren't further out in front is because of the direction they took with Turing. They decided not to improve price to performance, or just performance in general. They decided to dedicate a portion of the silicon to ray tracing, hardware accelerated ray tracing, which meant that for general rasterization performance, we didn't get a performance improvement. So Nvidia kind of didn't do anything for 2 years in terms of improving performance, and they were forced to with Ampere. Otherwise, well, they wouldn't have sold GPUs basically, because no one with Turing or Pascal would really want to upgrade. And that was the whole thing with, now my Pascal friends, it's time to upgrade. So yeah, it's all part of it's they've been able to make similar improvements at a similar time because of similar reasons. And it's also because, well, AMD's had to make a big leap forward, or there'd be no point releasing the generation, because obviously Nvidia was going to make a leap forward. Anything to add to that? Yeah,
basically I think AMD, they'd be predicting the sort of performance of Nvidia's next generation. So they'd be thinking, we're going to need to compete with like a 2080 Ti plus 30%. So then, they execute on that, and then Nvidia comes along and does their 30%. And then you get two cards that end up with basically a similar level of performance.
Yeah, they know what tools are available to them. They can pretty well simulate what they're going to achieve.
Yep.
And then they have to achieve what they can achieve. And then whoever goes first, then AMD's got to work out what they can offer to compete with that. And that's what they've done.
Next question is, what would be the next big leap in monitor features? Almost everything I've gone through with a fine-tooth comb, read binge watch Hardware Unboxed monitor reviews and Tim's stash, hasn't gotten me genuinely excited. I will be buying something soon, but really hoping 2021 shows me a monitor that will knock my socks off.
Is it your stash hasn't got him genuinely excited? Or
that's disappointing.
Bit rough.
A lot of stuff in monitors these days is just iteration on stuff, so like getting that little bit faster, getting that little bit better with colors or performance or whatever. I think if we're talking like next big leap, it really is HDR, and actually good HDR monitors. I think we've been talking about this for years now, sort of that next step, but really that is going to be, once we get affordable mid-range HDR monitors that don't cost $2,000 but are more like $500 or $600, then that'll be a big leap. But until then, it'll just be your minor iterations on performance. We'll get another panel that will have a higher refresh rate or better response times or whatever, and we'll just continue doing that. So yeah, just jump in where you feel the performance is acceptable. That's probably the best I would be hoping for at this point. All right, and this next question is one for you.
One for me?
Yeah.
Is it about monitors, is it?
Oh, hope not. Is it worth replacing the thermal paste / pads on your GPU to improve thermals? Alternatively, do you find the thermal paste and pads on cards you tear down to be sufficient?
Can't say I've ever really replaced a thermal pad, apart from when, liquid cooling. As for the thermal paste, look, I've always found it to be sufficient on the models we review. I test the card, tear it down, then clean away the thermal paste and reapply some higher quality stuff. Sometimes you see maybe a couple of degrees difference. It's hard to really say if that's, some other factors at play there. I haven't really done any real controlled testing on it, but look, the thermal paste seems good. It's not something you have to worry about. The only time I would suggest you change the thermal paste is when maybe you're buying a used card that's quite old, or that the previous owner has changed. Maybe they had a liquid cooling block on it. They quickly slapped the old cooler back on it. Maybe they didn't apply enough or do proper application of the thermal paste. So if thermals aren't great, that's a good place to start anyway. There's certainly other things like the mounting of the cooler and stuff like that. But yeah, if you buy a brand new card, I definitely wouldn't be changing the thermal paste on it. I would just leave it. And then, if it's an older card, I'm not even sure how old we're talking here. I've had cards that are 10 years old that the thermal paste on them is still perfectly fine.
Yep.
So you just have to, if there's a problem, look into it. I guess it's the don't fix it unless it ain't broke type deal. What relevance is base clock as a spec these days, assuming a large air cooler, Noctua D15 is being used? Well, I don't think it's any more or less relevant than it has been since we sort of started to get the boost clocks. It's really, for you guys, at least for you guys building your own computer, it's not really that relevant because you're always going to ensure plenty of power delivery and cooling and stuff, so it's always going to run well above the base spec even for all core workloads. It's more of a thing really carried over, I would have thought, from laptops.
Yeah, and OEM systems and that sort of thing. It's it's guaranteeing a minimum amount of performance, which if you're a cost-cutting OEM trying to ship out, 1 million desktops, you want to make sure that you're getting that performance with a 5-cent cooler. So, I think that's really where base clock comes into play. But for the DIY market with boosting and, even on Intel side, like basically boosting forever with like your MCE and default motherboard configurations, it's not that relevant for our sort of use cases.
No.
Next question. Do CPUs get better later into production, like 6 to 9 months after launch?
What do you mean better? Cheaper? More powerful? No, I think you mean as in silicon quality for overclocking headroom. I would imagine that's what you're asking there.
I'd say so.
Certainly not guaranteed, and the whole how long after, it depends on how new the process node is. But generally, yes, the process nodes mature and they get better yields and better quality silicon as a result. So I know there was a lot of claims that the Ryzen 5 3600 was overclocking much better compared to the original retail samples. And I think Gamers Nexus looked into that, and I think, I could be recalling wrong, so apologies if I am, but I think they found there was no difference, except I've bought 3 since then, and they've all overclocked like absolute champions, like 4.4 gigahertz easily. So but in my experience, typically, yes, they do get better for overclocking headroom and silicon quality, maybe slightly better power efficiency and things like that. When could we expect previous gen graphics cards to have a price cut? I think we talked about this earlier, that doesn't really happen, though it does, because we did see the Pascal cards like the 1080 Ti very briefly get discounted. So I guess it does happen, but it's a very brief window.
Yeah, this is largely dictated by whether AMD or Nvidia
get stock.
Well, I was more thinking gives a discount to retailers, because often they'll end production on the GPU, but retailers will still have stock. So usually Nvidia or AMD will just say, try sell those. And it's only when it gets really dire that like Nvidia would come along and try and maybe push out like a rebate or something to those retailers. Yeah,
I guess it comes down to how much excess inventory they had.
I think with this generation, we've seen that demand is so high for GPUs of any kind that while stuff is still selling out immediately, that even previous gen stuff, which looks horrible value, like a 2080 Ti looks like horrible value compared to modern cars.
It should be $500 now.
But the fact that it's available and a 3070 is not kind of puts it, they can still maybe sell a few cars at that price.
Yeah, I wouldn't be holding out
Yeah.
for it. The used market's hot right now, and I don't mean in a good way. I mean the pricing's like,
Yeah, it's insane.
There's demand there, and as a result, even used deals are terrible for the most part.
So yeah, it needs strong supply for these sort of things to be cut. So,
Yep.
for example, once we start seeing really strong 3070 and 3080 supply, then potentially, Nvidia would have no choice but to discount a 2080 Ti. But we're just not there yet. So, yeah.
All right, next question here. You've gone to great lengths in your CPU content to point out that the results aren't representative due to running at 1080p with an overspec'd GPU. That begs the question, when should I upgrade my CPU in realistic scenarios? I have a Haswell CPU, so Intel 4000 CPU, and game exclusively at 4K on a high-end GPU. I think I'm feeling the pain in Watch Dogs Legion, but would love to get some testing on this. So basically you're asking for a GPU scaling video, which I absolutely want to do once these companies let me do it. I keep getting new product after new product after new product, which normally I love, and I do love it. But yeah, there's some other products that we've already tested that I would absolutely love to do a bit more playing with. So yeah, GPU scaling video, I would imagine at the latest sometime in January. I think we're pretty well already booked out for December with content. So
Yep.
yeah, that's it. But basically, as you say, the CPU reviews are just that. They're a review of the CPU. We're trying to show how the CPUs compare when you're calling on the CPU for its performance, not when you're testing the GPU. So while it's not always super representative, it depends on the game you're playing. So if it's a very CPU intensive game, or maybe you're an esports gamer and you are more CPU limited than GPU limited, then that data is accurate. But if you're like Tim and you play like Assassin's Creed Odyssey at ultra wide resolutions, then you're mostly caring about GPU performance and not so much CPU performance. Do you think about getting perhaps a third person who tests other stuff like CPU coolers, PSUs, laptops, or motherboards, etc.? Not really. I guess we're not really, I think Steve from Gamers Nexus has talked about this as well. We're not really looking to do everything for a few reasons. Basically, I brought Tim on board, not just to expand into monitors and stuff, but obviously because it was somebody else, similar interests, able to cover similar topics to me and improve those topics, but then also bring something extra to the table. Having said that, it is a bit of a gamble for a YouTube channel. Really with YouTube, and I guess this is kind of dictated by your audience, which is kind of a weird thing, but it really wants you to stay in your lane. So our lane initially, what I took the channel into when I sort of took over was the big CPU and GPU benchmarks, and I did that for a few years. That content performed very reliably. It was stuff that obviously most of the people who were subscribed wanted. And when Tim came on board, we branched into monitors. There was also some laptop content, and I think it's fair to say neither did well initially.
No, they didn't.
So it was very much we were looking forward to the future, and I think it's fair to say that we took a bit of pain in the short term on that, because if I released a couple of videos, the channel stats were doing very well. We release a monitor video, not very good, and then my next video after that, not that good. So basically YouTube kind of punishes channels on it's kind of like the saying, you're only as good as your last video. So if you release a video that has bad watch time or bad click-through rate, they don't push your next content as heavily. And it kind of builds, it ramps up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You really see that clearly in the data. And it's not something we care about anymore. Obviously, you've got to care about it to create a successful YouTube channel and make it. But we thought, we'll make this investment now because we really saw Tim's monitor content as being something worth investing in. We'd build up an audience for that content and eventually become successful, which is where we've certainly got to now with it. But when you branch out into, I think you can definitely diversify too much on YouTube, and branch into too many areas. So if we had a guy that was specializing in CPU coolers. I don't know how much content there is around the year for that, but let's just say another category, and then maybe another guy doing another category, and then we sort of were known for 6 main things, like what we're known for Tim's monitor reviews. The problem with that is it's difficult to build all those categories where they're so big that when you release a video, a good portion of your 600,000 subscribers that are have alerts on will click on that. So if we just did the one thing, and this comes back to the staying in your lane thing, if we did just monitors, that was all the channel was known for, that's all we did. Every time a notification went out for a video on our channel, you knew it would be a monitor. And if you were interested, not everyone's going to be interested in that monitor, but there'll be a good percentage of people that just have to watch all of our monitor content. So we'll get pretty consistent viewership. But when you've got a monitor guy, a case guy, and people who don't necessarily want to, that are interested in our monitor content don't want to watch the case content, when that notification goes out, less people click it because we've diversified too much. And as far as we can tell, and I think Tim and I don't care about this too much anymore because the channel seems to do quite well based on the sort of niche that we've worked our way into. But when you send out a video, the success of the video generally is dictated within the first hour. I think it's still fair to say.
Yeah.
And what dictates that is the click-through rate first, and not necessarily foremost, but first. So the click-through rate, so how many people see that notification and click on it when they get it. And that's usually measured within the first hour. And then that's why clickbait became such a powerful tool used by YouTubers and why you saw it. And, everyone sort of, Linus has talked about this. We're all forced into doing it because if you don't do it, you fail. So if you've put a week into making a video that you're really proud of, you just have to do it. Unfortunately, that is the reality on YouTube because of that metric, the click-through rate. Now, stopping people from just doing really crazy thumbnails that actually do clickbait people, they bait them into a video that it's not about. The second most popular thing, as far as we can tell, is watch time. So YouTube want to see good click-through rate and then people watching a good percentage of the video, whatever that percentage is. It will vary from channel to channel and category to category. But they're the two main things I think is fair to say.
Yeah, and it's benchmarked not just against YouTube as a whole, but against your own channel.
Own channel, yeah.
So you want to make sure that YouTube in their studio and stuff tells us like this is performing as expected, this is below average, this is above average. So you always want to make sure your videos are in the average zone.
Yep.
But yeah, there's just a lot of complications with doing this you've been talking about in terms of like not great for YouTube. It's also we're kind of maxed out on the videos that we can make. Like we could do one extra video a week and do 7 a week, but beyond that, there's really strong diminishing returns for doing, say, a video every 12 hours.
That's another factor, sure.
So you'd have to have more channels. So you'd have to be basically like hiring a CPU cooler guy to make CPU cooler Unboxed or whatever. And then that kind of starts making us more like a business where we're trying to do all these different things and become more like a Linus.
Yeah, which we don't want to do.
Which is not really the goal of our channel. We don't want to be like the testing people. We want to test the stuff that we're interested in, make the content, keep it centralized on our channel. I think we're diversified enough that it benefits us. So we're at the point now where I think monitor contents for what we've been talking about
stands on its own now, for sure.
It stands on its own and overall gives us a net benefit because a lot of those videos do really well now. There's all sorts of benefits. But yeah, if we kept going further and further out, not only would we be trying to cram a lot of content onto the channel somehow, and then we'd have to, as I said, make new channels, fight against the algorithm, fight against all these different things. It just wouldn't work out that well. So I think for us, it's really just about doing what we love and just sticking on the channel.
That's what it's always been about.
We want to do, maybe we not do 6 videos a week anymore and do more like 4 or 5 videos that are really high quality and just focused on the things that we're interested in. And realistically speaking, if you want to learn about CPU coolers or power supplies or that sort of thing, there's other people who are doing good work with that content. That it makes more sense to look at an established reviewer in that space than it would be for us to hire someone that either is already doing that and already has a name for themselves, so they should just continue what they're doing, or hiring someone and then teaching them how to do it, building up that content. It's a lot of investment for something that, especially for things like power supplies that require really specific knowledge. I think there's a few people out there that are doing really good work in that area and good quality reviews.
We're not looking to conquer YouTube, I guess, is the point. We're just passionate about the things that we cover. I like doing the CPU and GPU benchmarks and a few of the other things I do. And Tim likes doing the stuff he likes doing.
Yeah.
And they complement each other quite well. And so I was just to say, you gave like Linus as an example. So Linus can kind of do anything. They can go all over the place because, and this is certainly not a knock on them, but they're more of an entertainment channel.
They've built their channel in that way.
I think
they've
they would
built their
agree,
channel in a very different way.
Another guy that does an excellent job of that is Kyle from Bitwit. He, while he still does very great technical reviews and things, I think he would agree also that there's certainly a comedy aspect to a lot of the things he does, and I think it's more of a vlog style tech channel maybe. So he can sort of dabble with all kinds of different things because people are tuning in to watch Kyle.
Yeah, that's right.
They want to watch him do his thing. So
I think the best way that I can describe sort of what we want Hardware Unboxed to be is sort of just to play our role.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like in a team sport or something, you have just people who you need everyone playing their role, doing their thing. So I think the tech community, that's how I like to see it. So you've got, we do our thing, Gamers Nexus does their thing, Bitwit does their thing, and then once you start watching all these different people, you get a really thorough feel for the community. So we don't need to be the one source for everything.
Definitely not the goal. Definitely not what we want.
Which it's very different for like a print situation where if you're doing like online reviews and that sort of thing, you're trying to build a website, it's much easier to try and dominate that space and it becomes much more beneficial for you. But on YouTube, we play our role. We do what we like doing, and other people can fill the gaps, and it doesn't have to be a competition necessarily for everything, which is great about the community. And one of the things I really like is it doesn't feel like we're competing with other channels. It feels like we're all complementing each other.
Well, like you do a lot of laptop stuff, but you then work a lot with Jared on getting laptops and doing things. And in other work or other industries, maybe you two would be arch enemies. Because he'd be like, you're stepping on my toes, get out of my laptop game. But whereas he welcomes your opinions and you have conversations together and share samples and work together.
More information ends up being better for people. So that's probably a very long answer to this question. Very, very long.
We never do that. Never.
But we're gonna play our role and stick to it.
Soon we're gonna need to do Q&A Unboxed, a separate channel for Q&A videos.
Yeah. All right. Whew. That does it. For at least...
Well, we sort of made it. We've still got
still got the Patreon ones, but The
Patreon float plane ones. We're going to come up with a better name now since it's not just one thing.
Yeah, it'll have to be like the
Hardware Unboxed community members.
Yeah, it's a bit of a clunky name. I'm not sure that one's going to stick.
Maybe we won't work that out right now. We'll just finish this video off.
We need you guys who are fans in Hardware Unboxed, Discord/Patreon/Floatplay members, you need to come up with a name for yourself, some sort of club or something.
So we're effectively outsourcing that to you guys. So do that for us.
We won't pay you or anything. You can come up with the name for free, and then we'll use it. Yeah. You have to give us the rights to it, and then we'll be all good. Yeah, that sounds like that's how that would work. So sounds good. Yep. Excellent. All right. Well, on that note, just do all the usual things: the subscribe thing, the like thing. The sign up to the Hardware community if you're interested, that thing that we still haven't named correctly. Yep. And apart from all those things, just thank you very much for watching. I'm your host, Steve. I'm your host, Tim. See you next time.